I'm too nostalgic, I'll admit it.
We graduated 4 months ago. What can you possibly be nostalgic for?
I'm nostalgic for conversations I had yesterday. I've begun reminiscing events before they even occur. I'm reminiscing this right now. I can't go to the bar because I've already looked back in it in my memory, and I didn't have a good time.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes. It's time to get the band back together. We had a fill-in last week, but we've got Eric Breen and Joe Corallo back here to do another comic book retrospective. Going to be talking about some classic Ironman, specifically the origin of Obadiah Stane and the first appearance of Ironmonger. Really great 3-issue story arc from Denny O'Neil. Sal Buscema, who else we got? Herb Trimpe, as well as Mark Wright on art. Very well illustrated comic book. Obviously, here with me are award-winning comic book editor-writer Joe Corallo. How you doing?
I'm all right, Wes and Breen. How are you guys?
I don't know. How you doing, Braden? Welcome to the channel, the voice of the voiceless.
Glad to be back.
Well, I'm glad you made it too. Hopefully you got everything taken care of and we can keep doing these retrospectives uninterrupted. We've got a ton of stuff to talk about here in the future. But in the here and now, we're going to be talking about some classic Iron Man. This came out between September and November 1985 by the legendary Denny O'Neil. Joe, Denny doesn't really get enough credit. I mean, you were talking about it on stream this weekend when we were doing, well, it'll be last weekend because this will come out 7 days after that. But, you know, Denny O'Neil really was the launching point of the MCU. You know, he did the first two story arcs, or the first two story arcs for Iron Man were mined directly from his stories.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a really wonderful celebrated run. I know Breen in the past has also mentioned, you know, Denny's written one of, if not the best, Iron Man run. And it does get glossed over. You feel bad, but at the same time, you get like his Batman work was so revolutionary that you can understand if some of the other stuff he worked on got glossed over. But no, what he was able to do, he took what David Michelinie and Bob Layton had set up with like Demon in a Bottle, and was able to expand upon Tony's struggle with alcoholism in a more grounded way as someone who had suffered from being an alcoholic, and you know, as well as other threads from Michelinie, Layton, and J.R.'s run on the book. So I definitely think, as much as I love David Michelinie, that Denny O'Neil really elevates a lot of what was set up before it in this run.
It's crazy how I don't know how often Denny O'Neil, he can bounce between different character archetypes, and he always feels at home. It doesn't matter if it's, you know, the aspirational hero, like a kind of a rogue kind of hero, whatever. It feels like if he's on the book, you know, there's always going to be quality. Not everybody can just jump between heroes like that and always have their stamp on them.
Yeah, I'll go one further about O'Neil's Iron Man run. We talk about the great comic book runs of all time, and we generally hit 80s Marvel, and obviously we have, you know, Miller's Daredevil, Simonson's Thor, Byrne and Claremont's X-Men, and Byrne's Fantastic Four. But O'Neil's Iron Man, I think, gets lost in that shuffle and belongs up there along with Stern's Avengers. Mm-hmm. But this is, in my opinion, the best run of Iron Man, and it's about 50 issues of really, really good stuff.
And Eric, this is an interesting time for Iron Man. We're heading towards Iron Man 200. Obviously, that is going to be a milestone issue. Tony Stark has not been Iron Man for quite some time. James Rhodes, Rhodey, is Iron Man at this point. What are your recollections about the response by customers? Were they upset that Rhodey was Iron Man? Were they ready for Tony to come back, or were they enjoying James Rhodes as Iron Man?
Well, were they upset? Not even a little bit, because it was organic to the story. There was a reason for it. It was to tell the story of Tony Stark's struggle with alcoholism. As Joe referenced, David Michelinie touched on it with Demon in a Bottle, but maybe comics weren't quite ready to do a deep dive into it at that time. So that's what O'Neil ended up doing. And it's the leading up to it took several issues where he fell a little bit further into the bottle to the point to where he became a full-blown alcoholic and no longer able to become Iron Man after a couple of failed attempts wearing the armor while, bleep faced. And, at that time, by that time, Rhodes had to take over. And the next 15 or 20 issues are even more interesting because once Tony sobered up, Rhodey began to resent Tony. Anything Tony said grated on his nerves. And I said, it's a great story arc to read from beginning to end because where we're coming in, they've put all that behind them and are working together. But no, there was, as far as people being ready for Tony to take over, what you knew that was going to happen eventually. People really liked the Rhodes character as Iron Man, which led to future incarnations of War Machine and et cetera. So this just, I said, there's everything about this story was so well done that fans accepted it every step of the way.
All right, Joe, let's give a little bit. Where are we at in history with comic books? Obviously, we're right in the middle of some of the most important, legendary comic runs in the history of Marvel Comics.
For sure.
What's going on? Is anything happening over at DC, or are they just trying to find their feet?
There's this thing. Technically, they're trying to find their feet because we're mid-crisis at this point. Mm-hmm. You have, I believe, during these issues that we were talking about, the Superman Annual 11 with the Mongol story of For the Man Who Has Everything came out, and I think DC presents 85 with the Superman Swamp Thing story that was also Alan Moore, came out right around here. There's really interesting stuff in terms of all that. Over at Marvel, the issue before this was a Secret Wars 2 tie-in, so you had Secret Wars 2 going on. Annie Innocenti's writing debut with Longshot, that miniseries comes out around Arthur Adams, early Art Adams, as he was working on that. So there's a lot of stuff. She-Hulk being part of the Fantastic Four. Just a lot of really cool, interesting stuff right around here. I could always gush about Grunwald's Cap run, especially at this point early on. Those that first half of his run is pretty solid. So you have all this great stuff going on. Legion of Superheroes and Teen Titans are still doing great. We're closing in on issue 200 of Uncanny X-Men. It's a good time to like comics.
It's a good time to be a comic book fan. Marvel's firing on all cylinders. DC's in the first big crisis that actually kind of works, and they're about to head on to better days. We still got a lot of good team books. That's always important.
Oh yeah, Batman the Outsiders is pretty deep in. You have the underrated Tom DeFalco Ron Friends run on Amazing Spider-Man going on now. So it would have been great. I wish I was Eric Breen, a little young comic book fan, getting to read all this stuff, as it happened for the first time. But going back, it's quite exciting. What's up,
Eric? But you'd be old now.
I'm still old. Oldish. I'm old enough.
Old adjacent, maybe.
I'm getting there faster than I want to. So let's get right in this. This starts out, we're going to do Iron Man 198 through 200. Iron Man 198 is Denny O'Neil, Sal Buscema. It's called Revelations. And this is essentially the origins of Obadiah Stane. We get 3 flashbacks when he's talking to Madame Mask, kind of about how he became, who he became, and how he got there. The first one is, 20 years in the past, he's in a city hotel room. His dad comes home. Apparently he's had a good roll of dice, made him a lot of money, and he wants to prove how lucky he is. Decides to pull out a 6-shooter and play some Russian roulette. It does not go well. A pretty startling origin for the character. It almost feels like they're trying to make him, kind of sympathetic here, Eric, but that ends up not being the case.
Well, no, because where it could have gone in sort of like a distorted Bruce Wayne origin, with the parent dying, he just looked at it as a sign of weakness. So even at that young age, he realized that his father, as he put it, said, my father was a loser, but he taught me a lesson to never lose myself. And then the second origin with the kid in the chess match, we find out
how absolutely insane he is.
Yeah, this guy is not. This guy's going to make Lex Luthor's bald childhood look tame.
Yes.
Yeah. So we'll go through the three origin stories. So he becomes bald after seeing what happened to his father. He becomes obsessed with chess, and he's got a rival there, and it's not going well. So he actually kills the kid's dog so that he can defeat him in chess, because he wants to gain advantages on people. A little far for even for a villain, Joe. I thought it was deranged and crazy, and it kind of fits the character.
Oh yeah, I mean, this is a great way to make a villain as monstrous as possible is killing a pet. I think that's pretty well established. So doing something like that really sets him off. And it's also the way, as you're going through this, that he is so stoic about it and nonchalant. I had to do what I had to do, as he's sort of saying this all to, Madame Mask. And
driving that or killing that dog was like driving Tony Stark to alcoholism. Just got to exploit a weakness. Just very matter of fact.
Yeah, exactly. And at this point, he has, fully humiliated Tony, because this is towards the end of Denny's run. So he took Stark Industries from him. He's taken a lot from Tony at this point. He's basically driving Tony to the brink. And this is all set up to, over the next couple of issues, of what he's hoping is going to be that final nail in the coffin. Because what else the story about the dog sets up, and to a lesser extent his father, but especially this story, Obadiah's MO is he wants to play a part in crushing his opponents, but ultimately his opponents have to defeat themselves. And that's what happens with this chess match. He didn't want to cheat to win in the conventional sense. He wanted to still win, but and have it hurt his opponent, making his opponent feel like they're the ones who lost themselves. And that's really what sells it, I think, with Obadiah.
And then, the last one is, I guess he's working at a company. He doesn't like his boss. He thinks he's unfit. So he basically doctors some pictures showing the boss's wife cheating on him, so he can basically steal his job, Breen. So that's all what he's all about. That's his MO. He wants to exploit your weakness, so you basically defeat yourself, just like Joe said.
Yeah, and that's what he did to Tony. And I said, if you go back and read those issues, he placed a femme fatale in Tony's orbit, who he became completely infatuated with. And at the time when he was falling apart, when he needed her the most, she basically said, "Get away from me, you drunken loser." So that's how he rolls. So just the way he, just systematically destroys his opponents. And Tony was kind of like his crowning achievement. And to this point, he had succeeded completely, which was the impetus for the run that, led us to where we are now.
Yeah. All right, so let's get on to the story that's in here now. I love this introduction of this mad scientist, Dr. Theron Atlanta. He's the only Nobel Prize winner ever to be put in an asylum for the criminally insane. We find that he's got Bethany Cave strapped to a gurney, ready for experiments. And you kind of find out before this that Tony, while he's in the old tin Iron Man suit, was fighting and he lost his I don't know, his girlfriend. I believe that's what she basically is.
Yeah, former girlfriend at this time.
Okay, probably the alcoholism got him. What do you guys think about Dr. Atlanta? I love it when back in the day when they make these villains, they're just had such great, I don't know, just introductions and explanations of how they got there. It's
mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I love it. It's it pulls to a lot of what Denny naturally sort of brought to the table. Like, it's a lot of like the kind of things he did with Batman, trying to add those kind of layers to it, make it more tragic, make it more interesting with the kind of characters he would bring in. And this plays right into that when you have these sort of things going on. And again, he's just kind of letting this doctor, do kind of whatever as long as it benefits him. And as long as he has final say and it's completely under his control. Obadiah is he's so interesting.
Yeah, he's the master chess player, and everyone's a piece in his game. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Whether you're the pawn or rook or whatever. And we start finding out this information, and he believes that when he destroyed Tony Stark with alcoholism, that was the end of Iron Man.
Yeah. And
through that, since Iron Man is still there, he has basically deduced that either James Rhodes or the Irwins are most likely in the suit now. And but Madame Mask brings up the information. It's like, from what I hear, Tony Stark is clean and sober right now, and his hubris will not let him hear it. He's convinced that he still has Tony, essentially drunk in an alley, but he decides to unveil his big new machinery, the circuits breaker, like attack vehicle, and that's essentially what he thinks is going to be the end of Iron Man, hopefully soon.
Yeah, no, and he launches that, and you go over a little bit. It gets touched on soon, but these different. He talks about the chessmen he had created that Tony had fought earlier, and
they whooped his butt.
Yes, or Iron Man rather fought earlier, but yeah, it's very interesting how he sets up this giant spider slayer kind of looking circuit breaker thing. It's like an Iron Man slayer, and yeah, they're working in this dome. And it's incoming, and it's gonna take 2 Iron Men to tackle this thing.
So the art of this, when he deploys the circuits breaker, and you got Iron Man, James Rhodes, and then you have Tony Stark in the old suit. Like, the battle in midair, Eric, is really fun. It's like you can do these aerial assault kind of battles, and they should be very kinetic, and it was a great. It was a really good action-packed piece that Sal Buscema put down on paper.
Yeah, and then the battle goes so quickly that Tony realizes, okay, this was too easy. It was almost like this was a test run for Obadiah to see, okay, how formidable. I know what Iron Man can do, but how formidable is Tony Stark? Because I'm sure he's probably figured out that he's the one in the other tin can, and he realizes, I've got to come back stronger. So that's, I think that's kind of a foreshadowing for what we get in 199. But I particularly liked when he's with Madame Mask, and she's said, I forgot the word she used, such ardor or whatever. You surprised me again, and then sticks her with the needle and goes, I'm full of surprises. So that's a nice.
He's been using her the whole time. He just uses everybody.
Yep.
And then we see the next scene, we see a brainwashed Bethany Cabe, but I don't think that's exactly what we're seeing, Joe. I think is it revealed within this story, because I didn't quite get it, or is it after this that there's been some type of mind switching?
That gets wrapped up, I believe, after 200.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit later, but she comes back. There's something clearly different about her, Eric.
Yeah, they want it to be a little bit of a mystery, but if you've been reading all along, you figure out pretty quick, if by nothing else, her diction, that this is Madame Mask in Bethany Cabe's body.
Yeah.
And it's weird. I said 200, 201 wraps up what happens in this story arc, and the next few issues after that, it unfolds what happens with Madame Mask and Bethany Cabe.
Yeah.
All right, so that brings us into Iron Man 99 or 199, excuse me. Denny O'Neil, Herb Trimpe, and one of them must die. It's put right on the intro, so there is a character that's going to die in this issue, and a lot of things start unfolding here. At the very beginning, we see Mrs. Arbogast, the former secretary of Tony Stark, is kidnapped, but Tony is unaware of that. He's vowing that he's going to find Bethany, but he will never use the suit. He's sworn off the armor, and he's going to go like back to where she was kidnapped to begin with. And then we get one of his associates. I think her name is, I think they call her Clyde, but I think it's Clemenstra, something like that. Clemenstra. Her brother Morley shows up to Circuits Maximus. I believe this is the company that Tony has started after he lost Stark Industries. And he's with a reporter, and we start getting the foundation laid for what's going to be a very action-packed issue here, Breen.
Yeah, this is where Obadiah makes his move. He realizes that he's got to come up with something even more insidious to break Tony once and for all. So what he's going to do is kidnap everybody that's important to him. And, he starts, as I said, starts the scene here, and then, he's kidnapped Mrs. Arbogast. So Rhodes goes, I've got to warn his friends. So he starts with Vic Martinelli, who is a good guy, but he's also pragmatic. Stane's paying his salary, so he is loyal. And he points out, he goes, I'm loyal to whoever pays my salary. But then he gives him a kind of a heads up, and that sends him off to the Hogans.
Yeah.
And
we see, Stane basically, he starts rounding up all these friends, and he declares he will not fail to crush Stark again. This time he's going to, finish the deal, and he orders phase 3, the Cleveland phase, to begin. And that's when Rhodey arrives in Cleveland looking for Pepper and Hogan, or Happy Hogan. He arrives in the nick of time as Pepper is being attacked, and he starts fighting the henchmen, but it does not go well for him. There's a helicopter shows up, it blasts him. They grab Pepper, and then unfortunately he can't pursue because the energy deflected onto another building. He's got to go save him. He ends up saving, I believe it's Pepper and Hogan's kids, and he finds out Happy is the next target. Joe.
Yeah, and page 9 of this with the helicopter shooting Rhodey in the back, the coloring. This is Bob Sharon. All that, having it like that, like the purple and blacks on Iron Man, and then just the whole layout here. The colors are great. It's very easy to read. I feel like simple colors really help. If this happens today, it would probably be a big muddied kind of mess. And it's nice to see these very stark differences in the colors and have it really pop like this. And also just bring out now that Akin and Garvey were the inkers on this, and they inked all the issues. So that's how you're able to get Sal Buscema, Herb Trimpe, and Mark Bright to look somewhat consistent, because
it is remarkably consistent. Yes.
Yeah. It's almost like inking is an art, and that it's important, and that if you want a book to have some level of consistency while also, maybe switching pencilers or whatever to accommodate schedules, you can do that and have a remarkably consistent book if you have the same inking team.
Yeah, unfortunately, they don't use inkers enough anymore. We should probably do a video on that one another time.
Yeah.
But who are these henchmen, Eric? I keep seeing them. I imagine, are these always Stane's henchmen? Are these the elite guys?
Well, no, the elite guys were the chessmen, and these guys might be the same guys that were in the armor. I don't think it's really important to the story. They're just, like I said, they are just henchmen, maybe a little more capable than others. But I do want to point out, it is a testament to how good Akin and Garvey were as inkers, because if you think about it, you had a milestone issue approaching, a huge, years-long storyline that Luke McDonald had done most of the art on, coming to a head, and they keep having to go to fill-in artists, but you never really notice that. Actually, when I didn't even realize, I'd forgotten that Buscema and Trimpe did these issues. I knew it wasn't Mark Bright, but it was so consistent. I didn't recognize either one of their styles come through, because it was the Iron Man style at the time. Yeah. So that's, kudos to them, because it's kind of crappy that they couldn't keep a consistent team going into a milestone issue, but they pulled it off.
Yeah.
So Stane's men are continuing the assault, the Cleveland phase. They're going after Happy Hogan. Rhodes, once again, kind of shows up right in the nick of time. We get this great scene where he's like ripping his way into the front of this helicopter. He's kicking butt and taking names. But then it starts to go south, and it's like, man, this is getting kind of repetitive. They're doing the exact same thing they just did, and it doesn't. The helicopter has a malfunction. It goes down. He saves Happy. It's like, oh, I'm glad they changed up the story here a little bit.
Yeah. No, and it's all very dynamic. Like the whole, all the action is for the whole issue. But I mean, from page 9 and just moving forward, everything's so dynamic. Like page 11 with like the falling like restaurant, like all this stuff. And, it's so good.
Yeah, it's shocking that it's actually 3 different pencilers when you get it. But then we get the most despicable act of all this kidnapping. Stane sends his men into New York to kidnap a baby. I believe it's the Anders baby. Tony, without the suit, because he's vowed off the suit, he arrives at this orphanage because he thinks maybe the baby's in danger. And he ends up trying to intervene. It does not go well. He takes an enormous blow to the head, wakes up in the hospital, and he realizes he's failed, and Obadiah Stane has kidnapped a baby. How despicable is this man? He's killing dogs and kidnapping babies, Joe.
Yes, he's sometimes villains are just bad people, and even if they went through something as horrifically violent that you wouldn't wish upon anyone, which is, witnessing their father's death in front of them as a little kid, they can still be just horrifically irredeemable characters. And that's okay, because this is a story where a hero is supposed to be stopping a very awful person.
Absolutely. And, O'Neil definitely, he embraces it. He's like, this is going to be the most despicable Iron Man villain in the history of the world. Mm-hmm. And I think he pretty much exceeds it. This, you hate the character by this point. And then we kind of get to this really well done set of scenes at the end where everything kind of starts coming together. There's a package that arrives at Circuit Maximus. I believe it's James Rhodes signs for it. We start seeing all these Stark associates converging on the building, this big dome. And then you realize that package itself was some type of bomb. It explodes, and this Tony arrives. Somebody has perished, but we do not know at this point. It was really well done, Eric. Like you didn't need words for any of this. Like you knew exactly what happened in this story without a word set.
No, that's true, and the way they spaced it out, you saw the explosion take a couple panels to fully get going, and right as they're arriving, so it blows the car over, and wherever James was, it was enough to break his leg. And that was I said, and going back to the previous scene real quick, the baby that was kidnapped was the baby that was delivered by Tony in a previous story arc. That was one of the most powerful moments in O'Neil's run, and that's what made it even more despicable. But yeah, you get to this point, they arrive just in time to see the explosion, and obviously somebody died. As you can, by process of elimination, who it is. And the only flaw I found in that was the reporter Susan said she was going to stick to Morley, but for some inexplicable reason, she wasn't with him when the building exploded. I don't think that's ever explained. I guess she must have had something better to do.
Go to the restroom or something.
But yeah. So that's like I said, just the aftermath, the wordless.
The
panel.
look of anguish on his face.
Oh, that last panel. Yeah.
My goodness.
Yeah, and that second to last page, I love that one panel, that just silent page other than the the ambulance sound, was that like third panel where Tony's like in agony as he's like walking, like because he's clearly hurt. He was just in a car accident, and the way that they do that, to stress that, like, look, Tony's also in pain, and I think it's important that Tony is human. He is not a super soldier or anything like that. So when he goes through that, it's a nice, just like one panel to kind of remind you, like, oh, you know, he is hurt going into all this.
You know what's crazy, Joe, is that we're about to get to the final stretch, and Stane is essentially the agent of his own demise. At this point, if he didn't want Tony Stark to be Iron Man, he's essentially said, "I will never put on the suit again." Mm-hmm. You know, it's bad news for me. It has not worked out for me. In a lot of ways, Stane has already won, but his hubris is too high for him to accept his victory on terms other than the way he wants it to happen. And if he didn't push it and do this right here, Tony Stark doesn't come back as Iron Man, in theory. Mm-hmm. And I always like it when, he's the master chess player, but ultimately he put himself in a checkmate when he put Tony Stark in a position where he had no other choice but put the armor on.
Yeah, but in his mind, he thought, he was getting Tony in checkmate because, like, oh, there's no way Tony is a strong enough person to overcome this and fight back. And that's great. Like,
it's perfect because the villain gets to come up and essentially because what they were trying to do got turned around on him. I love it when you get the it comes back on him twice as hard as they ever try to put it on somebody else, and that gets us into Iron Man 200. This is the milestone issue. Denny O'Neil, Mark Bright returning. It's called Resolutions, and we get a lot of that here. And Tony's friends are battered, they're bruised. We find out immediately, or pretty close to immediately, Morley is the character that has passed away. Rhodey is in no condition to don the armor. He's badly hurt. And Clyde, she blames Tony for Morley's death. And then finally Tony vows he's gonna take the armor and he's gonna end Stane himself. He can't take anymore. Stane thought that this would drive him to alcoholism once again, and he'd never be able to recover. And he didn't realize that Tony himself still had the wherewithal and the gumption to stand up for himself and his friends, Eric.
Well, Clyde is not wrong, and that's what one of the great things about this story was that's a perfectly human reaction for her to have. Yeah, they were friends, and yes, they kind of established she had fallen in love with Tony, but when the explosion killed her brother, she blamed Tony because in her mind, he could have stopped this if at any point he had done what she felt was going to be inevitable at some point anyway. And so I thought it was a very human reaction to blame him. And when Tony says, I don't understand, and she just unloads on him, I think that's kind of like the final piece. It's like, how many times do you have to get hit upside the head before you realize, I'm fighting a losing battle. I need to be Iron Man. And I think that was kind of like if the actions didn't do it, her unloading on him did.
I like how it's better than her saying, if only Tony Stark could be Iron Man again. And be like, oh my goodness, I do need to be Iron Man. Mm-hmm. She points out reality in the face, and he comes to the conclusion for himself. I appreciate that. That's good storytelling.
Oh yeah, and then I love on the next page there with James Rhodes is just like, I almost feel sorry for Stane, and then she just goes, I don't. Like,
absolutely. Do your worst.
And that's it. That's the best part of that scene, because despite everything she said about Tony, she realizes that, that Stane, she's smart enough to realize that Stane is the true reason why her brother's dead.
Yeah.
Tony might have been able to prevent it, but it's, she has she's not, it wasn't one of those cliches where the person that actually did it gets a pass so she can blame the wrong person. I mean, yes, she's pissed at Tony, but she knows who the real, villain is. And now she knows that, that guy's going to get his, and she's, So that's another really good piece of storytelling in just 2 words.
Yep. We get some segue here, which is basically setting the scene for this final confrontation. And Stane is telling Cabe that, like, he could have killed Tony, at any time, but he needs him to live after he's been defeated soundly and have to live with that defeat and knowing that Stane was better than him. Obviously, he has underestimated Tony. Tony has decided to put the armor on instead of pick up the bottle. And he's holding Madame Mask in a glass case. I got a question for you here, Brain. There's a strange look on Bethany's face. I know that that's actually Madame Mask in her body. But it feels like Stane doesn't know that, and maybe Atlanta did that without his knowledge. Like he wasn't supposed to.
I don't know if that was just something that just the way it was drawn. It's been a while since I've read past 200. I'm pretty sure that he did know, but I'm not 100% sure. So, that's a good question. I wish I had an answer.
It's really the body language and the facial expressions. Like
I think
he knows something.
He would have had to know because everything about her was different, and it was Bethany speaking as Madame Mask, so he had to have known.
Okay. I was looking at that. I haven't obviously read past this either.
Because he says, you once admired Stark, and it's almost like a little evil grin on her face, like, yeah, but now I want him dead.
Yeah.
And then we have Tony arriving at Avengers HQ, very determined. He's not being very nice to his teammates, and he gets his latest Mark 7 armor that nobody thought was ready yet. And he starts testing it out. He can test the performance, but not the weapons. And Tony's back in action, Joe, and ready to take some people down with his Iron Man suit. His new one, newly improved.
Yeah, no, this is great too. You have all this, mostly silent panels as he's getting ready, and then the big splash page of him in the new armor.
Yeah, very determined. And then that's not the only debut. Obadiah Stane decides to show off his new Ironmonger armor that he's developed. He took some old notes that he was able to gather from Tony Stark, created the Ironmonger armor, and at the same time, Iron Man arrives, and we find out he's got cloaking technology on this new suit. I think he blasts through into like the offices, says he wants to see Obadiah Stane. Mm-hmm. Stane realizes, oh no, I may have sealed my own demise here. I've underestimated Tony, and the circuit breaker arrives just to show that this new Iron Man suit is very capable, and he just defeats it like a knife through butter, Breen.
Yeah, can I point out a couple things real quick? The page where the full page splash of Tony as the new Iron Man, no speechifying. Yeah, like fists in the air saying, and now the new Iron Man is born. They leave that to Hawkeye and Mockingbird as he's flying off. And also, did you guys notice that they went back to the early 60s way of doing with the chapters? Mm-hmm. I love that.
That's chapters, yeah.
But as far as like after giving Bethany a tour of the factory where they were working on the technology that led to the Ironmonger, that's when Tony breaks into the office, and he realized, I love the panel where he's in his best Lex Luthor, where he's, will nothing be rid of him. And then that's what prompts him to go put the armor on after Tony wipes out everything that Stane can throw at him. So now
because you get the chessmen arrive who've already whooped up Iron Man pretty easily before, and he just knocks them down too, Joe. Like just letting you know that this new suit and this new more determined Tony is better than ever.
Oh yeah. No, it's great. And again, all these really dynamic panels, there's a lot of action, even panels where, it's not necessarily action driven. They're still very dynamic. Like there's just so much going on here. And it takes out the chessmen in about a page.
Half a page?
Yeah, it's very, very quick. And then that leads into a mirror of Tony armoring up with Obadiah armoring up into a very menacing pinup.
You know what I like about this confrontation is it's clear almost from the get-go that the Ironmonger suit is no match for the Mark 7 suit. If they just go at it, he's going to lose easily, and he ends up having to almost like run away and find a new way to attack him because really somebody that's never been in a suit before, no matter how powerful this Ironmonger suit, and it's based on Tony's old notes, should not be able to compete, with the new technology, Joe. It makes sense.
Yeah, and it's also great because this again mirrors perfectly what they mined for the movie. Like that's how that goes down in the movie. It's very much Obadiah's in this, like, it's powerful. It's because it's so huge, but it's clunky, and he doesn't really know what he's doing.
Yeah, and the only way that he can really get some space between him and Tony, like there's an old arch, he knocks it down, puts some people in danger, kind of makes this escape. Tony has to do a little bit of saving, but he realizes where he's gone. He goes into his laboratory, and then it turns out Tony doesn't have the upper hand. Obadiah has the upper hand because he still has his friends. I think he's threatening to electrocute him if he doesn't. No, he's threatening to electrocute him, right, Braid? Isn't that his big plan?
Yeah, if he does anything, he will electrocute. Everybody's got held hostage. Yeah,
and the real topper here is he pours himself a little glass and again just to taunt Tony.
At this point, I guess the armor, he uses the armor. It detects like a weak spot. He's able to blast it, take the electrocution off the table. So maybe now Tony can finally get Stane, and he's still got the upper hand because when he finally gets close to him, he's got the baby. Obadiah Stane knows no bounds of evilness, Joe. He's holding the baby, and he tells him, "Remove your helmet, or I will crush frail flesh to pulp between my palms, like with the baby's head."
Yeah. Like it's just, again, it's so monstrous, but yeah, and it's done in such a great way where you really are like, well, how the hell is he gonna get him out of this? And when you turn the page, he figures it out in a way that's like, it's not unsatisfying. It's like, okay, that makes sense. The reveal that he's getting help with outside controls for the suit, and then once those are knocked out, he's going to have a much more difficult time maneuvering it.
Yeah, he can't blast Obadiah, obviously, because he's holding the baby, so he blasts the ground, basically throws Obadiah's suit off. He accidentally drops the baby. Tony goes in, saves the baby, and we get this final confrontation, and Obadiah is not the... he's essentially his father. When he's put in the corner, he decides rather than being taken in by Tony Stark, he takes his helmet off, puts his blaster up, and takes his own life. Very tragic ending, but it all makes sense with the story that you read.
Yeah, I said back to the end of the battle when Tony blasts the factory. You realize how powerful this new armor is, that he just takes out the entirety of the factory with his blast, and that shuts off Stane's armor, and that's where he drops the baby, and that's the end of him. And then he drops like a stone, and and there really is. It's at that point you might consider it anticlimactic, but he basically says, yes, I'm not going to fight you anymore. You've won, but what I can do is deprive you of the fruits of your victory, which is a fundamental misunderstanding of Tony Stark and Stane's mind, that he thinks that everybody, he can't conceive that anybody doesn't think like him. So in his mind, the best way he can win is by depriving Tony of Stane being alive in his humiliation. So he just, what's left of his, the part of the armor that doesn't need computer help, is there's still the stuff that works in there is enough to blow his head off. And then just so the end, it's just like, what happened? Somebody lost. That's I thought it was just a great way to end this, because you would have needed another 10 or 12 pages to wrap up what was going on underneath, because you still don't know, hey, did everybody get out okay? They know they weren't in the building, but are you 100% sure? And that's what 201 deals with. But for knowing that that's coming, this was a perfect ending for this story.
Oh yeah,
I didn't find it anticlimactic at all. I thought it fit in perfectly. In the end, the man that he despised and mocked for being weak, that's exactly who he was.
No, I didn't say it was anticlimactic.
No,
some could perceive it as that.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
And it's great, though, because he starts telling the story about his dad, and Tony doesn't know this story, so he just naturally says, what are you talking about? Like, as he's, talking about, his father, and, it was really interesting, because he projected this idea of his father. I mean, he was too young to probably really have that much of a grasp of what his father was going to, so he kind of created his own narrative of, if his father were to live, he would have taken his own life at some other time because he was a loser. Like, when you're a loser, you can never come back. Like, that's like what he thought. Mm-hmm. And it seems like part of why Obadiah had to take his own life here was because he was now a loser, and there's no coming back. Like, once you've lost, life comes back to take you at some point. And it's really powerful and interesting, and it's subtle. It's weird to say a guy blowing his head off is done in a subtle fashion, but that is kind of what happens here. And I think a lot of times with some more recent comics and recent ways of writing and storytelling, it's not everyone. It's not, I'm not trying to condemn the whole industry here, but there's so much to discuss in just these last 2 pages. We could do an hour-long video just on this, but you see a lot of people, I think, spend a lot of time having discussions on comics that are kind of laying everything out for you and being very direct and blunt. And I don't quite understand why there are those conversations where there isn't nuance. And meanwhile, there is so much nuance and stuff to dig in here, but that's not being talked about as much. I don't know. It's just something that crosses my mind.
When you get to those last couple pages, I sat there and I was looking at it. I was just thinking about it. You don't get that a whole lot. I sort of get that a little bit, like when I saw Raphael pass away in the last Wrote It, but that's like one of my favorite comic characters. Mm-hmm. But it's so well done, and you're seeing what's happening, and you're kind of contemplating, why did this happen, kind of thing. And that's what you get here. It's kind of I wouldn't call it a showstopper, but it's a momentum stopper. You sit there and you look at it, and you kind of think about what you just read and experienced. You're like, yeah, this feels right, I guess, with the story that I read. And it's sad, but it's not sad. It's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of times you read these stories, and the culmination of a story arc that takes place over several issues, when the villain ultimately loses, a lot of times there's they fell into the volcano or into the river, or they did something that they can come back from. But this is a story that took 40 plus issues to tell, and I think that it was fitting that, given the way everything was set up, this was not the kind of character you really wanted to see get put in prison, break out, and start over again, because you can't top this story. And since this guy hadn't been around forever, I mean, he was kind of like designed to be in this arc. It was kind of a fitting way to write him out, where there was no, gray area. Did he survive? Well, no, he doesn't have a head. No. So I thought that really worked. That was really the only way this story could end and be completely effective. And Tony didn't have to kill him. For him to kill himself was fitting, given his life trajectory.
Yeah.
And Denny, I think he ends up wrapping this up by issue 204. This is a wonderful story. I would highly suggest it to anybody. Anything we do here on the retrospective, for the most part, is going to be kind of must-read stuff. If you're an Iron Man fan, I've read a pretty decent amount of Iron Man. I've never found a story I really loved where he wasn't in the Avengers, personally. And this is definitely the most emotional, impactful issue or story that I've read so far. I imagine this is collected in some type of trade, Joe, but it sounds like, if you get a chance, you should probably just go back and read the Denny O'Neil Iron Man run. Is that collected in a Masterworks or some type of omnibus?
there are two Epic collections. It's not finished in Epic collection just yet. I have the Ironmonger hardcover, which collects 193 to 200. That's how I read it for this. These Marvel hardcovers, some of them are still hard to get, some aren't. Hopefully they'll eventually do an omnibus or some other format. They have an omnibus of all the David Michelinie stuff before this, so it makes sense that they do one of Denny's. But yeah, it's tough. The Epic collections don't go up to what we read here.
Okay.
You might only be able to read it as far as collections in that Ironmonger hardcover. Maybe there's a couple of other collections that have it out there, but yeah, if you could get the Epic collections out now and that like Ironmonger hardcover, you'd have almost the whole run. So.
Yeah, inexplicably, they did the two that stopped at like 195 or 6.
Mm-hmm.
And those have been out for several years. They didn't do the next one, which finishes the story, but that's the same company that has the Vision and Scarlet Witch story from West Coast Avengers out of print when WandaVision starts. They're just never really all that on the ball with that stuff.
Yeah.
And to your point, Joe, that Ironmonger, I looked for that forever, and I finally just got so frustrated. I went out and found the individual issues.
Okay, Joe, that's what I want to talk about next, Breen. If people want to go find the back issues, are they in dollar bins? Are they going to have to spend a good amount of money on those?
No and no. They're usually not the stuff you'd find in a dollar box, but anywhere from $2 to $3 or $4 an issue would be the most you'd have to pay for any of the individual issues, because they are 35 years old now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
People will be very happy to have these in their collections, and the prices shouldn't spike too bad on these because they've already been adapted into the movies.
Right.
The speculator is going to be gone.
And then this one though, I did get signed by Rich Buckler, Herb Shrimpy, and Denny O'Neil.
Beautiful.
So this is it's precious to me, but it's also it's sad. You know, when you open it up and you're like, oh, they're all gone now. But
that's crazy. But you can certainly go back and continue to enjoy the works. The legacy will live on forever, not only in the movies but in the comic books. If you like Iron Man 1, go check this out, because it's even better.
It is.
The comic book's almost always better.
Oh, for sure. This is I don't know. Like, people also, even comic fans, which is staggering to me, will act like the movies or TV shows, somehow there's more emotion involved because you're watching something in motion. But I was more impacted emotionally by reading this story than the first Iron Man movie. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but yeah, comics can do a lot, and this story does a lot.
Ironmonger is not threatening to kill a baby in that movie, and that makes the defeat all that much more satisfying. Although I wish he hadn't killed himself, but it made sense of the story. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that page when he sees the body with that explosion, just the anguish.
Yeah.
Chills down your spine.
Mm-hmm. And the movie couldn't deal with 40 issues of plots and subplots, character, the Irwins, who I don't believe were used in the movie, were they?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just there was the
Rhodey was never Iron Man in the movie.
Yeah, the comic gives you so much more time to flesh out stories that movies don't have time for. So, I mean, so they do the best they can, but if you really want to get into the guts of a story, that's the comic book is still your best bet.
Yeah,
absolutely. So thank you all very much. Joe, do you have any parting words for Iron Man 198 through 200, the Ironmonger saga? I guess the end of beginning and end of Obadiah Stane.
Yeah, it's really it's great comics. It's Denny's at the top of his game. If people don't like Iron Man, like when you read this era of Iron Man, it is completely unrecognizable to Iron Man comics today. If you are reading or try to read Iron Man, you're like, I can't quite get into him. I don't get it. It's not my thing. Check this out, because this might be more up your alley, because I like some more modern takes on Iron Man, but this stuff's the best. That's just how it is.
Do you have any last words there?
Kind of echoing what Joe said. If you liked what you heard today, go read O'Neil's entire run. You will not be disappointed.
Yes.
Absolutely. Next week, we're going to be doing Justice League. Going back to DC and doing a team-up book, so that ought to be fun.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. We'll see y'all later.
Take care.
See ya.